I'm Pam Ashmore, and we're going to be talking about skin color, predominantly light and dark skin color. But first things first, you've got something to do, right? Everybody's like, oh, really? Come on, we just had lunch. All right, each table has a packet. In that packet, you have got 30 color cards. You are going to work as a group. You are going to line them up on your table from light to dark. I'm going to get little sticky things.
Are you going to turn the lights on? Because I can't see it.
In a line across your table, one straight line. You're going to line them up from light to dark. Number 1 should be the lightest. Number 30 should be the darkest. It will help if you number them in intervals of 5. So you can put 1, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. 1 should be the lightest, 30 should be the darkest. In addition, you should pick the card that best represents your skin tone. And you're going to, there are sheets of paper. There's something on the table called skin color variation. Each person should have one of these. The first question asks you to identify your skin color. So you're going to use these sticky tabs. Number 1, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, with 1 being the lightest, 30 being the darkest. Okay? So we'll help if you have numbers. So you want one line of 30 cards, 1 being the lightest, 30 being the darkest. And each person needs to
Which one? I need help with this part.
Okay.
I feel like I want to see it.
Okay. You're not. Come on, you can participate. Sounds like a kind of which one.
Look, I'm following. All right. Because I don't know.
1 should be the lightest, 30 should be the darkest. 1 is the lightest, 30 is the darkest. So can we get 30 across?
Yes, we are. We just trying to, we wanted to work backwards. Yes, ma'am.
So 30 is the darkest. You can use your little sticky. I thought I brought them.
Yes, ma'am.
Great. So number 1, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, and that will help you to complete this.
Okay.
And we'll talk about that in a moment. So somebody needs to number 1, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, and put the little sticky tabs out so that you can then count more easily. Does that make sense?
Okay.
1's going to be the lightest, and then you go to number 5, number 10, all the way to 30.
Is there more light
Yeah,
for
I
us?
put more light.
For those of us that they can't see it.
Press lunch. Okay, so these. Oh, thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, I like the curve. That works. We might have to do a curve. So this isn't rocket science. 1 is the lightest, 30 is the darkest. The first thing each individual does once you've got your lineup, identify the name of the card for the first space under individual activity. So everybody should have one of these.
Someone's got to be on this end of the, I think so.
So everybody has to write in a value. What's your skin color card? What are you called?
Number.
Everybody's going to find the card. Yeah, you have to write your skin color. You're going to write in what that color chip is. That's the first thing that you do. They are, but Maybe the chair, but I just the way better. I'm gonna do it out of the way.
When it was caramel.
Join in, please, have a seat.
Hey, Dr. so how are you? It's good to see you again. How are you? Oh, well. Yes, please.
I was just gonna say, like,
The first thing that you're going to do is try to find the color card that's sort of approximate to your skin tone. You have been able
I did say, like,
All right, ladies and gentlemen, does everybody have their color cards in order and numbered so that we can do the rest of this worksheet? Man, you are a tough group, let me tell you. It's like a lot of them are teachers, right? They're engaged.
And there's something about the light
All right,
in
the
here. I
very
don't even look like
next
me to
thing
me.
you do.
This doesn't.
Ladies and gentlemen, after you have identified your color card, the very next thing I want you to do is look at the different racial categories that were on the 2000 census. We've gotten a little more sophisticated, but not much. And please circle however you may have identified yourself back in 2000 based on the categories that the U.S. Census provided us with. All right, once you do that, each individual, and you're going to do this on an individual basis, you're going to look at the numbers of the cards and you're going to say where you think, if somebody called themselves black, where that color would begin and end. You do the same thing with white, with Asian, with Hispanic, with Native American, Pacific Islander, and multiracial. Each individual does this by himself or herself. So, when we say black, do you think that starts at 20 and goes to 30? Whatever you think is what you're going to put down. There's no right or wrong here, okay?
So this one circles the one that you identified. And then here you put the number of the one that is your selection number 5. Here, and then this, it is
So,
black
the
again.
black, would that begin at like 20 and go to 30, or would it start at 18, or where would it start? Would it start at 25 and go to 30? Whatever you think.
Very good person.
Once you have identified all of those categories,
Whichever one you think.
you are going to identify which of the racial categories does the color you chose fall into.
Well, but we're not numbering the back. We're numbered on the table. 1, 5, 10.
We never teach individual. You were really industrious. Oh, you were just really industrious. That's fine. That might be
This word, like,
look up.
don't look at my answer.
Right.
don't look, I don't wanna look at mine.
Yep. This is what, right, exactly. So is white from 1 to 7? You know, how do you think? And I'll give you about, at the most, about 7 more minutes to finish this. Because then we want to talk about it very briefly. So the last 2 questions, which of the racial categories does the color you choose to represent your own skin color fall into? And is the answer to the above question consistent with the perceptions you have of your racial color category? And like I said, ladies and gentlemen, there's no right or wrong, okay? I'm not gonna be collecting these. You're not being graded. We're gonna see how close all of the answers are or how far away they may be. So how are we doing here? Pretty good. We're almost done. Are you almost done? Yes, we are. Okay. We're close. How's your table? Almost done? Yeah? We doing all right, ladies? Almost done? Okay, and we're done? You look like you're all done and bored and waiting. All right. We're good? I think we're good. Everybody pretty much done. Yeah? All right, so ladies and gentlemen, I want you to listen to something. In the year 2000, the United States government identified race using terms like Black, Native American, White, Asian, Hispanic, multiracial, and Pacific Islander. What do those categories measure? What are they asking about? What kind of heritage? How are we defining heritage? What? All right, so regional, so geography. What about black and white? Skin color. What about Hispanic? Isn't that language? Okay, so you tell me what's the problem here. We're asking about geographic origin of perhaps a family lineage. We're asking about the language somebody speaks. Or we're asking about skin color. So in other words, the US government has no idea how to measure the racial / now they're using the word ethnic diversity of the American population. And that's because you can't do it. All right? What are they asking us now? We can now check off a box for other. We can check off many different categories. You can actually check off just about however many boxes you want. All right? The point is, this is difficult to do. So if somebody from each table would volunteer, what number define black? What range? Somebody, come on, be brave.
I put 21, but I'm not saying I'm wrong.
21 to what, Lynn?
To the end.
21 to 30, what did you have?
But
20 to 30?
18 to 21.
18 to 21 for black?
I meant 16, sorry.
All right, so 16 to what, Lynn?
To the end. 30.
16 to 30.
I did 1 to 30.
Oh, he did 1 to 30. All right, there's always one, all right? What did you put? Do we have a range other than 1 to 30?
15 to 30.
15 to 30? 17 to 30? 15 to 30. Well, we didn't hear the exact same answer. And if we do this all the way down, we're not going to hear the exact same answer. Okay, because you're perceiving how you should be dividing up a range of skin color variation that we as humans exhibit. All right, I thought this was only going to have about 20 to 25 people in this session. So I figured rather than trying to do the way that I would normally do this, I put together a little bit of a PowerPoint, all right? So bear with me because I need us all to be kind of on the same page before I have you do other things. And certainly, if you have questions, feel free. All right, I don't want to lecture per se. I'm not interested in doing that. So, these are a group of students that I had in St. Louis. Actually, Lynn, would you mind dimming the lights just a little bit, if you don't mind, because it's really a little hard. The slides are a little washed out. All right, so there's a very obvious answer to this question. So living in the United States, that's great, thank you. How do we typically determine if somebody belongs to a race different from our own? What do we look at? Skin color, thank you. All right? We have grown up in this country thinking that skin color defines quote unquote race. All right? And we're going to talk about that because I think it's very important that we understand something about the science of skin color. Now, I was at the University of Missouri St. Louis. Ferguson was one of our neighboring communities, and so was Florissant. And I worked with middle school students, I worked with teachers, and we had some very, very interesting experiences, and I'll tell you about that at the very end. So what I do want you to appreciate, because the title of this presentation was The Science of Skin Color. All right, we're not going to go into huge detail, but I do want you to try to understand a few things about skin color. Number one, geneticists and biologists would refer to it as a polygenic trait. So poly means what? Many. Many genes. All right, we don't even know for sure how many different genes, but many genes interact to basically tell your body genetically what your skin color is going to be. All right, the most recent figure that I found was that there were 364 genetic loci involved in producing the skin color that you or I have. A genetic loci just means a particular spot on a gene, on a chromosome. 360 something? This is complex. The other thing is that we often think that race is a package deal. And this young man, I had to write down his name, it's Laren Galloway. What doesn't ring true, in a sense, about this beautiful boy? Blue eyes, imagine that. Okay? Racial characteristics are not inherited as a package deal. It's complex genetics. That's why the same parents can produce identical twins. One we would probably say is black, the other we'd probably say is white. And I've had many students who have had parents, they have had a number of different siblings, and the siblings are all different skin tones. And the students would be harassed about, well, you know, either your mother cheated and had an affair with somebody that your dad didn't know about, or were you adopted? Because the range of skin color variation made no sense to people. And it's because we don't necessarily understand genetics real well. So these are two important points that I want you to think about. So we're going to be talking about some different things, all right? Skin color, light and dark, and that's what I'm going to focus on, represent adaptations. Adaptations are basically kind of shown here in these two slides. I have a short, stocky Inuit, and I would look much more like an Inuit than I would look like this beautiful Maasai herdsman who is tall and lean and linear. There's a reason for those two different body designs. One is most adaptable in cold climates because there's not as much space that you have to try to generate heat, and you're short and stocky because then it's easier to keep your core temperature where it needs to be. If you're tall and lean, well, you've got more surface area to cool down with. Okay, but it's also harder for this person to stay warm because the extremities are far away from the core of the body. So we know that the physical body has something to do with adaptations that human beings made prehistorically. All right? If I'm cold, I do what I've done today. I've got multiple layers, okay? If we could, we would kind of inch up that thermostat, but we can't do that. So we use culture to mediate the effects of the natural environment. What I'm going to be focusing on today is indigenous populations. What does that word mean? What's indigenous? Native to, right, native to. So we're talking about indigenous populations, and we're going to be talking about before we could get in our car, get on a bus, get on a plane, and go anywhere in the world. The only place we could go in the world is where our 2 feet took us, okay? So we're going to be talking about before we had culture that helped us to adjust to different kinds of climates and habitats. And when we're thinking about skin color, we're talking about genetic inheritance, and ultimately we're talking about human migrations. 2 terms. Yeah, you knew this was going to be a little bad because I had the word science in the title. Acclimatization and adaptation. It's important to understand the difference. All right, acclimatization is a physiological response. Is anybody a snow skier? No? Okay. If I go to the beach and I don't use SPF like 70 plus, I miss that tan thing, okay? I just miss it completely. I turn into a crispy critter, all right? I have a friend who was from Nigeria, and Okoro Congo was really, really dark in skin color. And he worked with me when I was in St. Louis, and he would tell the middle schoolers, he would say, my mom always knew when I skipped school because she could always tell that I had a tan. And the students are looking at him like, hey man, what, you know? But he got darker. So in this country, in this culture, we have kind of a weird thing about tans if you're light skin color. So a tan, typically, I have a daughter who is in her 30s, and she would want to go to tanning salons because if she was going to the beach, she would burn, so she would try to get a little tan first. But she was really doing it because if you're light in skin color, a tan typically means what? In our culture, what?
Look healthier.
You look healthier. You might even, to members of the opposite sex, be more attractive. But what is a tan? What is your body trying to do? Yeah, your body's kicking into gear, trying to produce more pigment to protect your skin cells from the harmful effects of ultraviolet radiation. So in other words, a tan means, look at me, I'm pretty stupid. I went out and exposed my body to ultraviolet radiation and damaged my cells. But you don't keep a tan, okay? It goes away. That's an acclimatization. An adaptation is different. Black and white skin colors represent a biological adaptation because it is a change that has happened in the physiology and the biology of our bodies that have allowed us to adjust to certain different climatic conditions. So it's one of the things that I really, really stress with the kids that I have here at UTC in my classes is that we really need to appreciate that it's a darn good thing we don't all look the same, that we don't have the same skin color. Because both light and dark skin color has led to the success of our species. We would not have been as successful in occupying the globe had we not had that kind of variation. And that's what we're going to explore a little bit. So I'm going to walk you through some things and then we'll do some things with it. So, Roy Romano on the top left, tanned, untanned. I've got a Italian soccer star. I have a Greek and an Italian model. So, a good example of acclimatization, how different the skin coloration can be when they are exposed to ultraviolet radiation. Okay, but let's talk about ultraviolet radiation. So we've got 3 different kinds of radiation that the sun produces, and they're defined as UVC rays, UVB rays and UVA rays. UVC rays typically don't get through the atmosphere, so we don't have to worry about that, all right? UVB rays, however, will go through to the top surface of our skin, the epidermis. UVA can be even more damaging and can go all the way down into the dermis of the skin. So we are really, when you're putting on sunscreen, you're really trying to protect yourself from both, but typically we are focusing on UVB because UVA is going to take a lot of exposure, and it's also going to depend on your skin color to begin with. So somebody like me, I have to worry about UVA because I turn into that crispy critter. Now, UVB will penetrate the epidermis. We have cells called melanocytes, and those melanocytes produce melanin, which is pigment. All right, Okura, the graduate student that I worked with, would say, Dr. Ashmore is melanin challenged, which I thought was really appropriate because I am. I'm melanin challenged. Genetically, my body, even though I may have the same number of melanocytes as another person about my size, if that person is darker in skin color, that just means that his or her genes control for a greater production of melanin as opposed to mine. All right, so that's basically, when we're talking about skin pigmentation, that's how it works. And we all know that long-term exposure to the harmful effects of ultraviolet radiation can produce skin cancer called melanoma. Right? So we know that tans, even though we see people out there trying to get a nice tan, because especially in this culture, we associate that with health and beauty and all of that, long-term exposure can be very, very dangerous if you're not very careful. So we are aware of melanoma. All right, zone 1. It's basically where we find people with the indigenous peoples, all right, so let's not forget, we're talking about indigenous populations. So zone 1 is where we find people with the darkest skin color, all right? Zone 2, people are lighter, and certainly their skin coloration can change greatly with the seasons. And 3, we find typically people with very, very light skin colors. So there's a certain geographic distribution. And this is another picture of that with lightest to darkest. So explain that. Why? Why is it that the indigenous populations that basically we find in this area of the world, why do they have the darkest skin color? What's adaptively significant about that? Okay, closest to the equator because, right, because that's where ultraviolet radiation is more direct. As you move away from equatorial areas, those rays are much more oblique, right? So, for a long time, we discussed the fact, we explained dark skin color based on exactly what you just said to me. All right, and we're going to come back and visit that in just a moment. This was research that was done by a biological anthropologist, and her name is Nina Jablonski, and she is at Pennsylvania State University, and she has spent decades researching the adaptive significance of light and dark skin color. She and her husband worked with NASA to map out the intensity of UVB rays around the world. And what you see on this looks very familiar to the slide we just saw. So they were able, using NASA satellite imagery, to put some data, to put some numbers, because of course that's what scientists need to do. You need to collect numbers. You have a hypothesis, you have to collect data, you have to test that hypothesis, and that's basically what they did with this. And it seemed to fit really, really well. There's just one problem. When do people die of melanoma? Typically what age? Old, young, teenage? Middle age. There's a real problem with that. If this was the reason for why dark skin color is adaptable in equatorial areas, people should be removed from the population before they pass on their genes to the next generation. Right? If this was what biologists call a selective factor, people shouldn't contribute their genes to the next generation. So what Dr. Jablonski discovered was she was at a medical convention, and there were 3 OBGYNs presenting information about birth defects. And what they discovered was they had 3 young ladies that had no history of any kind of birth defect in any of their families. And each of these young ladies, unfortunately, gave birth to children with severe neural tubal maladies. And what they discovered was that all 3 of these young ladies had gone to tanning salons during their first trimester. Think about that. What they discovered was that vitamin B folate, I think many of us are aware of it now, that if a woman gets pregnant, it's really important for her to make sure that she's got adequate amounts of vitamin B folate, because that's so important to the development of basically the neural tube for that infant. And that if you're vitamin B deficient, then you increase the probability that the spinal column's not going to develop well. Right? Guys, you're not off the hook either, okay? Because if we're talking about a real selection event, it's got to involve both men and women. Now, we do things with rats that we can't do to humans, all right? So they zapped a bunch of male rats with real heavy doses of UVB rays. And what they discovered was that spermatogenesis was really severely interrupted. Spermatogenesis is the cell division process involved with the production of sperm. They could make those male rats infertile. So we have a factor more important than melanoma. Melanoma probably plays a role, but it doesn't make sense from and kind of a biological perception or perspective thinking about adaptations. But deficiencies in vitamin B folate may very well explain why it is most adaptable for indigenous populations to have had dark skin color and to have had dark skin genetically programmed if they were in locations close to the equator. Okay, this seems to be the real selection event. And that really helps us to understand the adaptive significance of dark skin color. But what about folks that look like me? What explains that? Okay, what's adaptively significant about light skin coloration? We also think, so before we go to light skin coloration, like I said, I usually do this more hands-on, but I thought I would kind of do this to get us all on the same page. One more thing that's still a hypothesis. This isn't necessarily factual, but it's funny because every time I teach this, and I've done this at this point in time with thousands of people, I get stories told to me that seem to validate this. If you are dark in skin color, you have a greater propensity to experience cold-related injuries than if you look like me. There was a study done by the US military looking at servicemen stationed in Korea and stationed in Alaska. Now, the assumption is that if you were a black or white military individual, you were issued the same gear. We know that that historically was not the case. So the researchers tried to correct for that bias, and even when they did that and looked at the medical records, what they discovered was that troops that identified themselves as black reported to the infirmaries more often than troops who identified themselves as white with cold-related injuries. Now, I was teaching this at the University of Missouri St. Louis. I had a student in my class who was a vet and who had been stationed in Afghanistan and Pakistan, and he went, "Oh my God." And I was like, "What?" He said, "Well, I was up in the mountains, and if you increase altitude, it gets really cold, especially at night." And he was black, and he said, "My commanding officer thought I was full of crap because I was getting frostbite in my fingers, but none of the other guys were." He was the only black soldier in that particular unit. And sure enough, he got frostbite. So this is still a hypothesis, and let me make that clear, we're still trying to test that. But once again, we can do studies on piebald guinea pigs that we can't do on human beings. Piebald guinea pigs have multiple different colors in their skin, and we've put them in freezers, and what we have found out is that frostbite seems to occur fastest in the patches of very, very dark skin. So there may be something to that. Okay, so what about people that look like me? Well, we know that as you move away from the equator, the sun's rays are less direct, they're more oblique. So consequently, it gets a little harder to obtain enough sunlight so that we are able to synthesize vitamin D. Now, what are the natural sources of vitamin D other than sunlight? What are your guesses? No, not broccoli. What kind of milk? Remember, you couldn't go to Food City and buy milk. What kind of milk? Breast milk, mother's milk. And fish oil. Sunlight, breast milk, fish oil. Those are the natural sources of vitamin D. And if you don't get enough exposure to the sun, if you're vitamin D deficient, you can develop rickets. And we've all seen pictures of youngsters that have rickets with the bowed legs because the bones in the teeth don't develop properly. The bones of the lower leg basically bow out because of the weight of the upper body. And if you are a female, it can really change the way that the birth canal is structured. So it can be very damaging in the terms of the survivalship of an infant, but also the ability of a mother to give birth. So vitamin D deficiency, if you look like me, then this skin color is most adaptable in places that are more insufficient with sunlight. Okay, if you're close to the equator, it doesn't really matter. So that is the adaptive significance of light skin color. All right, so I'm going to pick some volunteers, and what I would like you to do, and I'm sorry I don't have a bigger map, so I'm going to ask the people at the side tables to kind of move this way to see what we're going to be doing. Based on everything I just talked to you about, if you can identify like a cultural cue, that is great, but I want you to take a card and I want you to put the people up on the map. Go for it. I'm just going to hand these things around. Who's willing? Come on. Who else? I've got a bunch of these. Oh, come on. See, I'm just going to start handing them out. Oh, you're going to do the lady, not the chimpanzee. Please. If you have a card, go up to the map, please, and try to put that person where you think that person should go. Who else is willing?
Are we putting them on there based on their skin tone?
Who else? Who else? Who else? Who else?
Are we doing it on their skin tone or by what they're wearing?
Skin tone, if you recognize
It'll be labeled.
who the person is, it's about where their indigenous population would have been. I have sit, I'm sorry, but I can just who didn't do one yet? You're just I know. Ladies, would you help, please? I need a couple more. You're wearing, who do that one? And this
So you started actually? No, I didn't start actually.
well,
And then did they have to cut it?
I have no idea where that
They just put that in there? No, this is attached to it.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, can everybody kind of move over here? I mean, I'll try to explain what we've got. But I basically asked people to put pictures on the map thinking about skin color variation. And overall, what I'm seeing is that a lot of you did a really good job. A couple of interesting things. At 30 degrees north latitude, we find the Navajo that refer to themselves as the Red People. At 30 degrees south latitude, we find the Kumsan Bushmen, who also refer to themselves as the Red People. Now, this is somebody who belongs in Papua New Guinea. This is an Inuit that would be pretty far north. This person, very light in skin color, is the native indigenous population of Japan, the Ainu. So they would go there. Overall, you kind of, oh, this guy's really in the wrong place. This guy, who are the native people of Australia? Thank you, the Aboriginals. Now, we've got a couple interesting things going on. This person is basically in the right place. I'm just going to move a few things around here. All right, this person is very light in skin color, but lives pretty darn close to the equator. If I told you this was an Ituri tribes person, would that make it any clearer to you? These are the pygmies that live where? Traditionally, in the tropical rainforest. So they can be light in skin color. Why? Right. So they're much lighter than the people that are either in East or West Africa at about the same latitude. Australian Aboriginal, really dark in skin color. I have a colleague who's a cultural anthropologist who does a great deal of research in Australia. Over the summers, unlike St. Louis, where we'd have different colors to represent air quality, they would have different colors that would represent exposure to ultraviolet radiation because it has the highest incidence of melanoma in the world. Why? Is it the Aboriginals who are getting melanoma? No, it's people who look like me, okay? Australia was colonized by the English. They took prisoners out of the prisons and dumped them off in Australia. So it's the descendants that look like me. So very darkened skin color. Inuit, way up here, way up north, but lightened skin, but darkened skin color. Why?
Glare from the ice.
Yes. Yes. Glare from the ice and snow. So they.
Get burned really.
And what do they eat? Traditionally, fish oil. Fish oil. So they don't have to worry about vitamin D. All right, I need you now to get down and dirty with me for a little bit. All right, on the floor. Don't go away, don't run away. You are standing with me on the equator, all right? This is 10 degrees north, 20, 30, 40, 50, and 60. You are going to work together to very quickly put down color cards. And you are going to have a single line. All right, remember I told you that red tones come in at about 30 degrees. I'm going to start. If you have a card, here I'm going to give you a couple. If you have a card, then get down there and start putting people down on the floor. You've got to work together, ladies and gentlemen. So, the equator should have what? Light or dark? Dark. All right. And the real white skin color should be where? All right. So you got to get down. You got to put your cards down, please. I know, I'm making you do stuff. I'm horrible. Man. But we had lunch, right? So we have to do something. Active. I think that's it. Here you go.
Are we working together?
Yes, a single line, please.
Yeah. I'm the dark red.
The
red starts at
All right.
Reddish is at 30.
Thank you. I didn't know where else.
So that's even.
Okay, so then I need to go.
Such a great experience. I love this.
I know. I too.
Most of that.
It's I think the glare.
Yeah, I think so too.
It's just brighter.
It's gonna be dark. I was thinking that, but when I got down there.
Oh, really?
I think you were coming in where you were leaving.
I did.
All right, we have all these big gaps. There shouldn't be such big gaps. Let's fill the gaps in a little bit.
Well, maybe it just needs to go that way a little
Fill the gaps in. Fill the gaps in. Here's another,
Oh, okay. That'll help it.
somebody, yeah, let's kind of scoot them.
That's like, wow.
I didn't know how far away to put but there shouldn't be gaps. All right, so the question that I'm going to ask you is, if we assume that these are kind of equally spaced, all right, we have some bigger gaps than what there should be, and that's because we probably should be shifted this way so that everything's down from 60 degrees to the equator. All right, where as a group would black skin color end and white skin color begin?
I mean, isn't there some brown in between there or something? I don't know.
Well, human skin color is a gradation between light and dark. And we are focusing in on what we would refer to as black and white. So where do you think? I hear some discussion. At 30.
40, 50. I don't know.
What way do I go here?
Go toward,
I think it's 35.
Okay, well, 35, so
I like the 35.
we're about right here. Okay, when I do this with adults like you, what happens? People get down on their hands and knees, and they're really industrious, and they're saying, okay, white and black should be here, and somebody says, wait a minute, that looks like my uncle. And then the line goes this way. And then somebody says, oh, wait a minute, that looks like my niece. And then the line does this. When I do this with middle schoolers, the middle schoolers look at me like I'm a fool. And they say, you can't do it. And they're right. So the people who said 0 to 30, or 1 through 30 for many of those categories, that was exactly correct, all right? So give yourselves a little pat on the shoulder, Nancy, all right. So, ladies and gentlemen, if we had no shape, if we had hair texture, if we had lip shape, if we had body shape, it's just like this. It's called clinal or continuous variation. And where you draw the line or somebody else draws the line, that is an artificial division that we are imposing on a biological characteristic that is continuous. All right, so let me finish up. If you don't mind, let's just kind of have a seat for a second and we'll finish up. But you did a great job. You should all be very proud of yourselves. So, ladies and gentlemen, when we're talking about light and dark skin color, we are talking about the fact that this biological characteristic mediates the effects of ultraviolet radiation. Okay, so it's a good thing that we aren't all one color. However, so this is kind of the take-home, all right? Skin color is found on a continuum. If we were to map it out, what we would have, and most of us know what a bell-shaped curve looks like, if we were to map out skin color variation, we would have a bell-shaped curve. And that's the point, okay? We can't take skin color variation and put it into 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 different categories and say that that represents a race. So biology, the biological sciences, do not support taking human beings, and our genus and species name is Homo sapiens, taking Homo sapiens and dividing us up into different races. We do it culturally, but we can't do it biologically because it's meaningless. So we have to really understand, and when I work with kids, they do exactly what you just did today. When we work with youngsters, we do things a little bit more. We have them put on sunglasses and hold umbrellas, and we have milk jugs so that they can read that vitamin D milk is fortified with it so that they understand. We have to really underscore, and this is something I always have to do whenever I'm presenting this. I am never going to say that racism doesn't exist because we know it does, right? Race is a lived reality. But what we're finding is that, and this is really something very interesting, scientifically, we have discovered it is harder for me to change a myth that you have in your heads about something than it is for me to change factual knowledge. We hang on to myths much harder. But what I have found, I worked with the middle schoolers in Florissant and Ferguson, and what I found, and my colleagues found, middle schoolers would come up to us, and we publish this, and would say, the next time so-and-so calls me on the playground, I'm gonna turn to them and say, you don't know jack about science. So I think it's important for us to understand the adaptive significance of skin color. My students, even the students here at UTC, say, well, you've like screwed us up for life. Because what do we do? What are we always asking students to do? If you're applying for financial aid, what do you have to do? And we need need that information because we are trying to address unequal access to resources. But the categories that we're using are not valid. So I have a whole legacy of students when they're asked to do something like that and they have a space, they write in Homo sapiens. And I'm so proud of them, I really am. But yet, Yancy probably wouldn't appreciate that because that like really will screw up his data. But what I need people, and my request to you is, especially if you're interacting with students in any way, shape, or form, when you use the word race, you have to think about how you're using it. Every time we use that word, we're validating the fact that if I belong to one race and you belong to another, we must biologically be very different from one another. And what the Human Genome Project has told us is that no two human beings on Earth vary very much between one another genetically. And the greatest amount of variation in the world are populations that are indigenous to the continent of Africa. And that's because they're the oldest populations. That's where Homo sapiens came from, is the African continent. So those populations genetically are the most varied. So ladies and gentlemen, questions. Does anybody have any questions? We've got a few minutes, and I really appreciate the fact that you've been patient after lunch and you have kind of tolerated me. But do you have any questions at all that I can address? Yes, please.
If you ran the world, how would you start defining racial categories for forms and things like
I
that?
don't think you can. I think that we have to start thinking about ethnicities. And if we do that, we're going to have thousands of categories. But there isn't really a great way to do it. That's the problem. The American Association of Anthropology has a project called the Race Project. They did a history of the U.S. Census and how the U.S. Census, from its inception, has tried to figure out how do we quantify human variation in the United States. We don't know how to do it because you really can't do it. That's the problem. We're trying to do something that really can't be done. So we might have to ask different questions. Yeah, but good question. Other questions? Yes, ma'am.
I guess something that has, not concerned me, but I have a question about.
Yes, please.
I grew up learning that there were a lot of ethnicities.
Oh, and there are.
Right, but now, the first question is your ethnicity, and it's Hispanic or not Hispanic.
Yeah, right.
And so
Right,
that
it's crazy.
distinction,
It's
that's
crazy.
not what I grew up learning.
Right.
I mean, and knowledge can change. So I'm not
Right.
trying to say what I grew up learning
Right,
was the gospel or the facts. But that throws me. I never thought of myself as not Hispanic.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And it,
makes them to not be it.
Yeah,
right, no, it's crazy. And again, it's because we don't know how to do it.
Yeah.
We just don't know how to do it. And not everybody who speaks Spanish would consider themselves Hispanic.
Absolutely.
So what are we asking? You know, now we've got to add geography. Your ancestral lineage came from where in the world? So, and Yancy's thinking, oh dear God. This is going to get even harder because he collects all the data about all the students on our campus. So, yeah, go ahead.
So when we're having these discussions about diversity, inclusion, and these kind of culturally reinforced nomenclatures, for lack of a better word, are being brought up with words like race or ethnicity. Would it be more valuable to go ahead and address the elephant in the room first, to work past it, and then if so, I figured that was going to be kind of a loaded question. If so, how would you suggest to do that so that we can move forward to help empower each other?
Well, what we were doing, I haven't had the opportunity to really do something like that here. What we were doing at the University of Missouri St. Louis was we had a center. And it focused in, it was created by anthropologists in the College of Arts and Sciences and educators in the College of Education. So we had the best pedagogical approach and we had the hard science. And what we did, we hosted over 20,000 people. The youngest, and this terrified me, the youngest was 6 years old, the oldest was 86. So we did community groups, we did our neighboring schools, and there's nothing more terrifying. Put me in front of graduate students, I'm fine. Put me in front of kindergartners, it's terrifying. Because they will ask you anything and you can't ever predict what they're gonna ask. Okay, what we discovered was, because then we worked with teachers, was that if the students understood, and we would tone it down, okay, so that the students could understand this, if they understood this, then that was the framework on which to have conversations about ethnic and cultural diversity. Because what you did is you blew away the elephant in the room to start with. So somebody with dark skin color is just as important, just as equal as somebody with light skin color. So that was the main building blocks, and then we went off of that. So it's a good question. It's hard. I mean, there's wonderful multicultural or pluralistic educational programs out there, but ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry, I don't think we've made a lot of progress since I've been in higher education. We're still having some of the same conversations. We're still fighting the same fight. So that hasn't been hugely successful. My bias is obvious. My bias is that we have to understand the science before we can really then have culturally engaging and meaningful conversations. But that's my bias, so. Other questions? All right, well, you've been great. Thank you so much for participating.